Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of How to Build a Game Studio. I am Trevor Oz, and I am joined today by our best programmer, Jack Steele.
What's up, guys?
Also, worst programmer. Well, I guess I'm a programmer. It's just not my title.
And we
I want to be the best programmer.
And we're also joined by our worst programmer, Kent Campbell.
I hate you, Trevor. Hate you. One day I'm gonna get a nice intro.
That day is not today.
For Christmas, maybe. That's what I want my Christmas gift to be.
All right.
A nice intro.
For the holidays, I'll give you a nice intro.
Oh yeah.
But we're not there yet.
Oh damn.
It might end up being one of the episodes when we record 50 during the time that we're together in one place.
That's a lot.
Yeah, just rapid fire.
I didn't realize we were gonna do quite that many.
Days straight.
Yeah, we'll just record like 50 episodes.
Just record for 24 hours.
Have like the next year settled.
Yeah, let's do
it. Oh man, that would be rough. Anyway, so today we decided to actually have a topic that we wanted to talk about from the beginning to end. And we decided to talk about our favorite PlayStation games, the original PSX system, PS1. I know that I made the conversion from when I was moving generations, I moved from a Genesis to N64, but then I got the PlayStation maybe a year or two after that. So it was probably around 98, I want to say. When did you guys first get your PlayStations?
I don't think I owned one until like maybe the PlayStation 2, maybe even PlayStation 3 era. I got my system very, very late. But like prior to that, you could actually rent systems from, I think it was Blockbuster, or like I had friends that would let me, borrow it. Like I don't know if you remember a guy named Nielsen that I went to high school with, but I actually swapped him. I let him borrow my Saturn for, I don't know, like a week or something like that, and I borrowed his PlayStation. So I got some, gaming time in with the system a lot earlier, but I didn't own one until very, very late.
How about you, Jack?
Yeah, the PS1 was pretty big for me. For me, I went from Genesis to PlayStation, and then Dreamcast, and pretty much mostly the Xbox console since then. But yeah, me and my sisters played a good bit of PlayStation back in the day.
All right, so Jack, since you're the most PlayStation guy, PlayStation 1, I'm gonna start with you. What are some of your favorite games?
My favorite games on there? Well, I guess first it was like a pretty big time, like high time for RPGs on the PlayStation 1. Like I'd group all those like together for me because there's just so many that I can think of, like like Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, Tactics. I know I've mentioned like Legend of Dragoon on previous episodes as one of my favorite all-time games. And then there were a ton of other good ones like Xenogears and Legend of Legaia, and the list just goes on there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Final Fantasies, those were the Final Fantasies that kind of got me into RPGs, I would say. Because I don't think I was actually into RPGs before Final Fantasy VII, honestly. It might have been my first actual RPG that I ever sat down and played.
You missed the Super Nintendo era, man.
Yeah, there were some good ones on that.
For me, I got the Super Nintendo late. So I did miss a lot, although I played a little bit of Super Mario RPG, so that might actually be my first RPG, but the first one that I played a ton of was definitely Final Fantasy VII. Because I just remember like being home on the weekend from school and having a friend of mine over, and we would just like play it all night and just take turns playing it. But I think I'm actually more partial to 9 than I am to 7 or 8.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I like 9 better.
I think 9 was just my favorite. I don't know if it's just because I got more into the fantasy aspect of 9 compared to like the futuristic, like dark futuristic mixed with fantasy thing that 7 and even 8 had going on.
9's really interesting because I remember, like, at the time, everyone just always lost their shit over 7. And then there was like the smaller group of people, but there were still some really passionate fans with 8. And a lot of people just, like, you never really heard them talk about 9.
Yeah.
But now, like, at the time, 9 was always one of my favorites as well. But now it seems like a lot of people have kind of changed their thinking, so to speak, where I hear a lot of favorable things about 9, whereas before it just, like, people either hadn't played it or they were like, oh yeah, 9, whatever. So I always thought that was really interesting, and I don't know when or why that happened, but it's definitely something that I've noticed as a relatively, like, objective observer, because for me, like, my big Final Fantasies are the earlier ones on the NES or SNES. Where, so, like, I I don't have to get in and, like, try to defend my favorite from those 3 games or, like, whatever, but it's been really interesting now, especially with all the re-releases, where people, at least in my circles, were really excited about 9 when they re-released it on current platforms.
Yeah, I was stoked when they brought 9 back out, and you see a lot of people stoked about 8 coming back out too, which before that, like, everybody was like, it's okay, 8 sucks. A lot of people
that's Boo's favorite.
A lot of people didn't like it, but like I didn't think it sucked. I didn't think it was bad. Like I enjoyed it, but it's definitely probably my least favorite of those 3.
I got too distracted playing the stupid card game to, like, actually progress far enough in the story. I pretty much just stopped and was like, all right, card game. What was it, Triple Triad? It's like, that's it. That's what I'm playing.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that card game. Like, every Final Fantasy has like that interesting thing, at least probably starting with that one maybe. Cause that had that 9 had I could have swore 9 had something, I just can't think of it right now. And 10 had Blitzball. So I almost feel like 8 started that, like, almost mini game kind of thing within the game.
Yeah, I think, well, 7 had Chocobo Racing, is that right? Or am I making that?
Yeah, you can kind of count that at that casino or whatever.
Yeah, that's
true. Yeah.
It just wasn't nearly as in depth as
I think
like
that
the
was
games
it.
went on as Blitzball or Triple Triad.
They almost became games in themselves.
Yeah, they could totally just release a Blitzball game and I would buy it. Because I thought Blitzball was a lot of fun. But that was PlayStation 2.
Don't talk about that. You're not allowed. It's forbidden.
How dare me?
Until probably a future podcast episode.
More than likely, yes. I'm sure we'll touch on it at some point. But now that Jack's named his favorite RPGs, we'll come back to you, Jack. But Kent, are there any games that you can think of that you were into, even though you got a PlayStation later?
Just RPGs or just my
general.
actual picks? So Jack already mentioned it, but obviously Final Fantasy Tactics, which is still one of my favorite games of all time. In fact, a pretty big inspiration for a lot of the work we're doing on the current game. So that is really, really high up there. Another RPG. So I'll start with the RPGs. I think I got 4 or 5 total, but I'll go over the RPGs first, just because was our segue. So Tactics, and then I really enjoyed Parasite Eve. I never actually got a chance to play the second one, but the first one was really, really awesome. It was kind of like, I think it was because at the time I was not used. It had more of a mature theme to it, which I was not as used to with a lot of my RPGs at the time. It had kind of an interesting combat system, just kind of an interesting story. Like, I don't know what it was about it. It's not like there was one thing I can point at and go, "Oh, that's what made Parasite Eve great." But it was a really unique game, and I really enjoyed it when I played it. I honestly don't remember that much about it, aside from the fact that I really liked it. So maybe at some point they'll do a re-release, a remaster, and I can kind of go back to it and, you know, be able to better articulate exactly what it was I enjoyed so much about that game. And then as far as other titles that I really remember playing, I liked all of the Suikoden's. I think it was 1 and 2 on the original PlayStation. 2 was especially great. That's kind of, in my opinion, where they really kind of honed the formula.
Yeah, those were both PlayStation 1. You're correct.
And yeah, those were fantastic. Like, I love the huge array of characters that you could choose from, and just interesting world and kind of the myths behind and in that world. And then let's see, as far as the other games, Silent Hill was huge for me. That was, I think, no, that was not. The first Resident Evil was really my first survival horror game, but like the first Silent Hill was the one that really just blew me away. Like, I absolutely love it. I still consider Silent Hill 2 to be like the greatest survival horror game of all time. But it was, the first Silent Hill that really kind of sparked my love, not only for the franchise, but for just survival horror in general. And yeah, they nailed pretty much every aspect of that first game. That was really when I think that was the title that made me go, I have to get this console, because I was playing it at a friend's house, and I remember he actually went to bed, and I just stayed up the entire night playing it, even though it was a friend from the carnival, and we had to go back to work, at 8 a.m. the next day to set up or tear down, I can't remember what it was, a bunch of carnival rides, and then, a full day of physical labor. So I was dead that whole day, but I just couldn't stop playing. So yeah, that was definitely one of the better games on the original PlayStation. And then the last one I can think of would be, I played a lot of Twisted Metal. I honestly don't remember if it was the first or the second one that I played a lot of, but I don't think it really matters that much. But
yeah, I don't think it's a huge difference. I think 2 might have been the more popular, if I remember right, but
it's often the case, right? They
yeah.
made the fun game and then kind of made the polished experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, those games, we played a lot of those games with another friend from the carnival, Brian Baker, because he actually brought his console out on the road, and so we would sneak over to his place and play a bunch of games whenever we had any free time, and a lot of times it was Twisted Metal, so spent a lot of hours on that.
Nice.
I think that's my list. I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting.
Really solid.
A ton of good games on it, but
those are good choices. A lot of those I missed out on. Like, I played a little bit of Twisted Metal, but I think sadly I got more into the WWE parody version of that when it released on PlayStation 2 and Xbox, WWE Crush Hour, which was Twisted Metal with wrestlers.
Hey man, if it had the same,
I've never even heard of this.
Good.
It was such a dumb idea, but
also
I don't know, it was still fun though.
In my mind, I've never played or seen this game, but in my mind, it's not wrestlers like in cars driving around. It's wrestlers just like with wheels, and they're just kind of flying around the battlefield.
It's not that. It's definitely wrestlers in cars driving.
Damn it!
Hey, one can dream.
Missed opportunity for sure.
But yeah, it was definitely that was a real dumb PlayStation 2 game. So, but I do remember it. But I think for me, along with a lot of the games that you guys have said so far, what made me think of the WWE Crush Hour, the wrestling games for PlayStation, we're kind of like in that era, like N64, PlayStation. That generation had probably some of the best wrestling games that you could get on either console. N64 had no mercy, which I'm sure we'll talk about N64 on another episode. But yeah, the SmackDown and SmackDown 2 on PlayStation were two of the best like arcade wrestling games, because the combat was like super fast paced, and it was all about, getting your finishers off before your opponent could hit their finishers, stuff like that. And it was, but it's so weird going back and watching them, because like the wrestlers didn't even have like full entrances. They basically just did their, like, they quote unquote walked to the ring, but it was literally just a video of what their video came up on the TV when they were doing their entrance, and then them walking in front of that. So it was just like the wrestler was almost like it almost looked like they were in front of a green screen with their video like playing where the green screen was supposed to be. And it was so dumb, but at the time it was like, holy crap, there's video on this.
Yeah, they probably didn't have the memory to be able to do like a full crazy intro.
Yeah, so like it was insane. Because because you couldn't get actual videos like that on the N64 games, because it was the DVD versus the cartridge at the time. So they would do like on N64 they would do videos with like still images that would just flash. But yeah, but they also had the entrances, so it was kind of a trade-off. So it was interesting the way that each, because they were both developed by two different developers. So it was an interesting time for wrestling games and stuff like that. In another big one that was just one of those things. Before we got on the podcast, Jack was talking about the Pizza Hut demo disc, and
Hell yeah.
I remember playing Tony Hawk on that disc. I just remember like sitting in my living room playing Tony Hawk, and then just having my mom walk in and be like, "That game sounds fun," and and just being
Yes,
like,
Mom, it is.
It sure
Yeah.
is.
and it was fun. But then like getting the actual game and playing that, and playing like pretty much almost every sequel. Man, I wish there was a good like Tony Hawk-esque skateboarding game out now.
Aren't there's a bunch of rumors, I think, that they're supposed to be bringing Skate back at some point, right?
Yeah, but that's been for years. Like literally every year at E3, like you see, come on EA, give us Skate 4, but
It's like
Skate,
Skate.
yeah, exactly. Like Skate's different though, because it's more trying to be like more realistic skateboarding. Like I just want a good arcade like skater like Tony Hawk.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Tony Hawk was awesome. I really don't have any interest in skating, and
Same.
I mean,
Yeah, same here.
like I'm sure a ton of people playing that game, but that game was just so good.
Yeah, it was too much fun. Like just
Interesting side note. When I worked at Activision, I worked both at Neversoft and at Infinity Ward, and a lot of the Neversoft guys, obviously, there were still a lot of the people that had been there forever.
Yeah.
Did a lot of work on most, if not all, of the earlier Tony Hawk games, and it was really cool to kind of like, when you were at Neversoft, they had all the rows of skateboards hanging on the wall, and like you were able to talk to the guys about some of the cooler things that happened. It was so it was a really kind of, and even aside from being a fan of the games, like Tony Hawk really brings some nostalgia to me. Obviously I wasn't there, but like just almost seeing it through the eyes of the devs was always really cool.
Yeah, I never even thought about that, but yeah, I mean, I knew you worked at Neversoft. I just never like thought that, hey, that was the studio that made Tony Hawk.
Yeah, it was really awesome.
Yeah. Jack, do you have any others that we hadn't mentioned?
Some other ones. I know this is another RPG, but it was actually, I think, the first RPG I really got into. And that was Tales of Destiny. I absolutely love that game, and that's like what really got me into the whole Tales series in general. I always enjoy those.
Totally forgot that there was a Tales game on the original PlayStation.
Yeah, Tales of Destiny 1 and 2.
Because I think Symphonia was my first.
Yeah, Symphonia was what, GameCube?
Yeah.
Yeah, Symphonia was.
Yeah. Yeah, I never got into the Tales games, oddly enough. I think they're just ones that skipped by, even though, like, if you think about, like, GameCube RPGs, like, I totally got into Bat and Kaitos, but did not get into Tales of Symphonia.
You used to insult me by calling me Giacomo.
I know.
Which is just some random character from that game.
Yeah, a random dude in that.
It makes
I'm
no
pretty
sense
sure he
as
was
an
the
insult.
villain.
I think he was.
Yeah.
But it was just like, how that turned into an insult, who the hell knows? I mean, like all of our insults, it's just some random word or dumb thing. But
Right.
I'll never forget Bat and Kaitos. Not only because it was a fun game with like a unique mechanic, but because you would always call me Giacomo.
It was just such a weird name that like it like provided an earworm inside my head that like
I mean, we did insult each other a lot, so when you insult each other that often, you need to get new and fresh insults, even if they don't make sense.
You got to get creative.
Sometimes
Thank you.
You got to dig deep.
Thank you, Nintendo and Bat and Kaitos. I'm waiting for the remakes. Just do it, please, Mr. Nintendo.
Mr. Nintendo.
Mr. Nintendo, obviously the head decision maker at Nintendo.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
Another game that no one mentioned, Legacy of Kain.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yep, those were pretty good.
Yeah, those games were also on PlayStation.
I often forget like what platform stuff originated on, because like to me, I don't know why, but Legacy of Kain is Dreamcast because like.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think it's because the one Legacy of Kain game, like the big one for me was the Dreamcast one, even though I played like the Soul Reaver games prior.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like in my mind, it's like, oh yeah, that was a Dreamcast franchise, but obviously it'd been around well before that.
Yeah, PlayStation 1 started a lot of stuff. I mean, if you want to think about it, because I mean, I never got into the originals, but Tomb Raider was a PlayStation game.
Oh, that did start on there, yeah.
The original Tomb Raider, if I'm not mistaken, was actually a Saturn exclusive.
The Saturn, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not a lot of people associate it with PlayStation because like after that it was pretty much purely PlayStation, but it was actually one of the reasons that I ended up getting a Saturn over a PlayStation originally.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not realize that because it like totally became synonymous with PlayStation for a long time. That and like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. We've seen remakes of those come out recently, Crash and Spyro. But I never played those back in the day, so.
I'm double checking that I'm not making this
that up.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was like a multi-console release or not. If it came out on like PS1, Saturn at the same time.
Maybe.
According
to Wikipedia, it actually did release in the same time on Saturn and PlayStation.
Maybe it was originally supposed to be, and then a deal fell through.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't remember. It'd been way too long.
Or maybe just in your kid brain at the time you thought it was.
Definitely possible.
Because I think we've all had that moment where like our kid brain's like, oh, this is only coming to this system, so I got to get this.
Damn kid brain.
I'm sure we didn't do a lot of fact checking back in the day.
All I did was fact checking. Crazy.
But, back in the day, fact checking, we would have to like go to a library or something.
A what? I don't know what you're talking. Stop making up words, Trevor.
I still use the library, all right?
Yeah, just make stuff up. Like there's some
Hey.
place you can go to for knowledge.
Hey, here is a good tip from a poor indie game dev. If you wanna rent movies, games, or books, go to the library. It's free.
It's a good tip. I mean, if
What's
such a
your,
place existed.
I mean, it does because I was just there. I just returned some games today.
Oh, Trevor, you're a crazy man.
But yeah, that's how I get to play newer games. The library. But yeah, I'm trying to think of. You guys have any others that you?
I have two big ones that I played a ton back in the day. The first one is, did you guys ever play the Mega Man Legends games?
Oh yeah.
I
Oh,
did
those are
not
so
play
good.
them, but is that the one with the really terrible voice acting?
It might be, yeah. I'm sure they were just trying to add voice acting into a Mega Man game for the first time, and they just didn't really care.
Well, I mean, that's just any voice acting from that era because they didn't get actual voice actors most of the time. It was like people that were on the dev team usually.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
whoever sounded cool. All right, you're on.
But yeah, dude, Mega Man Legends was awesome.
Yeah, it was like because I don't know what I think I just rented it from Blockbuster because I just always loved Mega Man as a kid. And whenever I started playing it, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but they introduce like RPG elements to it almost, and you like a looting system where you could pick up different blasters and different stuff like that.
I don't remember the looting system, but I know it was an RPG. Like it was very much a like here's a world, go run around in it as
Yeah.
Mega Man. Like it's been the only Mega Man RPG. I'm really surprised that they haven't brought that damn thing back.
Well,
Yeah, I
did
see nothing but good
the-
about it online.
What was the Battle Network games? I never actually played one because I'm not a big handheld guy, but I know they did a ton of those for Game Boy Advance, and I think those were RPGs.
They were RPG-ish, like kind of RPG, kind of a little bit of Pokemon elements to them.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I mean, it's not quite the same as Pokemon, but I'm honestly I'm very surprised they haven't done more of those games though, because those games always seem to do well. But
Yeah, Mega Man fell on hard times for a little while, although I think it's kind of with the more recent ones, it's kind of come back.
Yeah, thankfully. I mean, I love Mega Man stuff, but yeah, Mega Man Legends was awesome.
Yeah, I played 1 and 2 a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I rented them from probably Blockbuster as well. But yeah, I was a big fan of those games. You said you had another one, Jack?
Oh yeah, the other one, which I thought was like one of the coolest like aspects of the PS1. It was like such a new concept to me at the time. But did you guys ever play the Monster Rancher game on PS1?
No, but I know what you're gonna say. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, because I don't know if you guys had ever like seen what Monster Rancher is, because I don't know how popular it was, but it was a similar like monster capturing game that was in line with like Pokemon and Digimon and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in the show, I guess you unlocked these monsters through these like stone tablets almost. They were in the shape of a disc. So in the game, in order to get a new monster, you would pop open your PlayStation and just insert any random disc in your house, and it would read it and spit out like some random monster in the game. And I just remember going through like Kent's sister and I went through and just found every single possible disc we could find at my parents' place and just spent hours scanning each and every one of them. But it was so much fun.
Yeah, that's the kind of cool stuff that like because I knew about that feature, I just never experienced it firsthand. But like that's the kind of cool stuff that they were doing at the time. Because you also had Because just thinking of something on that level too, Metal Gear Solid was PlayStation 1. But that was when you had Psycho Mantis that would read your memory card and tell you about what games you played, and you're like, what?
Oh yeah.
So that was definitely a good one.
Yeah, I'm sure like these days it's not that crazy of a mechanic or anything, but back in the day, like whenever you saw the disc tray pop open or whatever, you were just like, oh no, my game's done. It just crashed. I lost everything. So I remember just being like super nervous when it was like, okay, now open your PlayStation. And I was like, you can't do that. You're not
Right?
allowed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean it's one of those things where, like, before that, any game system that you ever had, you opened it or you pulled the cartridge out, and it was like that information's gone.
Yeah, it's just game
Yeah.
over after
Yeah,
that.
the game goes off the screen. Your system crashes or whatever. You turn it off. You have to turn it back on. But like in this aspect, it's telling you to just throw in another disc, and you're like, what?
That's against the rules.
Yeah, it's so weird. What was it? On PlayStation 2, the SingStar games didn't do something quite similar, but they did a thing where if you had another SingStar game, you could basically just like basically tell it, hey, I'm gonna pop in a different version of SingStar, and then it would pop it in, and then you could play those songs off that disc too.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and I know there was a game that lets you play your own music in it, and I want to say I think it might have been Britney's Dance Beat maybe on PlayStation 2.
Really? Would it just like make tracks to like
Yeah,
it
it
would
would
read
just
the
kind of like
soundtrack and like make the
exactly like
buttons for it?
Yeah, it would just like randomly make buttons. I want to say I think it was Britney's Dance Beat, but it might have been something else. But it was something like that. But it's interesting how the hardware gimmicks have changed, and how they tried to innovate in different ways. Whereas like back then it wasn't a lot of it wasn't so much as adding new hardware, but trying to like play around with what the new hardware of the time.
Right.
I am reconnected, and I leave for 2 minutes, and you guys are talking about Britney Spears games, so clearly I cannot leave you alone. Thank you, Comcast, for being the worst ISP in the entire world and disconnecting me during that meeting.
Well, hey Ken, we had a smooth transition. We didn't even note that you were gone. You could have just come back into the
Yeah, we were just gonna cover it up, and you just come back and like, hey, I was gone. I disconnected.
I should have just been like, yeah, I was always here.
Yeah.
Well, I heard
Britney's
Jack
dance
talking
moves.
about the monster tablets. I believe you get them from these stone tablets, and then it just went totally silent, and I was like, Jack, did you lose your train of thought? But then I was connected.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that happens time to time.
so basically, it like whenever you put your own disc in while playing Monster Rancher, it would give you monsters based on any random disc that you popped into the drive.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's where we transitioned.
Yeah, I'd mentioned how Stacy and I would stay up for hours reading every single disc in my parents' house. We just have stacks of them.
And then
Yeah, so that's how
logically, you went,
Yeah.
okay, I got everything now. I guess I could have listened to it when I listened to the podcast, but whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Now we're repeating things for everybody. So
Well, hey, maybe a bunch of other people will disconnect while listening, and for some reason, when it reconnects them, it'll skip them ahead by
It
about
skips
2
that
minutes.
part, yeah.
I'm just looking out for those.
Yeah, it
people,
could happen.
all right?
You know, we're there for those people specifically.
Yeah.
we just gave a quick recap for those just tuning in. So,
Yeah, you never know. Maybe randomly people like to jump halfway through podcast. They like to pretend they're listening to radio.
and now they are. Thank you guys for tuning in. Back to the PlayStation. Are there any other games that you guys can think of? I'm trying to think of any more, but
There's probably a billion more because there were so many games. But
yeah, it was a system that had a ton of games, and I know someone's out there like screaming about their favorite game, like why
Yeah,
didn't
like
you mention
how could you
this?
not bring this up?
yeah, that's all right. Just it's at Trevor Oz, I believe, on Twitter. You can tell him he's dumb and you hate
Yeah,
him.
any
Because,
complaints whatsoever,
yeah,
just direct all of them right there.
even
I
if
mean,
they're not related to us, like if you are upset about something at your job or like somebody cut you off in traffic, you can yell at Trevor for it. I give you permission.
Alternatively, you can send those emails to social media at winterborngames.com,
No, don't do it. I get those emails too.
where you where you can send those complaints in, along with any questions that you might have for the podcast, and we may read them on a future episode if we get enough of them.
Also, send in any insults you have that are stranger than Giacomo, because I'm curious.
Yeah, actually, that's a good one. If you call, within reason, mind you.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's the internet. We have to nothing
Yeah,
like
don't open those floodgates.
racist or
Yeah,
terrible person.
yeah, exactly. Nothing that we couldn't say, because granted, we'll just probably delete that. Um,
Make
but
sure you
yeah,
send it to Trevor at Trevor Oz.
no, just send those to social media at winterborngames.com. You can also, if you're interested in being on the podcast and you're a game dev or work in the games industry, use that same email address. But I think that'll pretty much wrap us up for this episode, guys.
Yep.
So, Kent, Jack, thank you both for being on today.
Sure thing.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And again, make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff on iTunes. If you give us those sweet 5-star reviews on iTunes, we will read them here on the podcast, and it'll let other people see the podcast, and so they can listen too, and they can enjoy our great talks and terrible transitions thanks to Kent.
You can't see a podcast, Trevor. You listen to a podcast. God.
It's so they can see the podcast image on iTunes.
That's better.
So they can find us.
I have awesome transitions.
And so yeah, if you want to find us, you want other people to find us, please do that. We would greatly appreciate it. And we will be back in a week's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.